the last thing you want to do is put the idea in someone's head that they can't change their brain, that they can't change their body. It's an incredible piece of equipment that we don't really fully understand.
No.
But there are two things that seem at odds with each other, but it doesn't matter what you say, it matters what you do. And one word can make all the difference, plus or minus.
Hey, fitness friends, welcome back to the Future of Fitness podcast and interview series. This is your host, Eric Malzone, and this is episode number 125. I talked to Max Shank. He's back, and nothing puts a smile on my face like a conversation with Max Shank. And do I have any plans when I go into conversations with Max? Hell no. No way. You just buckle up and you go for the ride. And that's the fun. That's why Max Shank will always be welcome on my show, because it's a blast. And some of the things we talked about, you know what? I'm not even going to try to explain. It was just really good, from life philosophy to business philosophy to his new product that's coming out hopefully soon. He teases us with that. And he's just a great guy. And his beard is envious for sure. And I'm excited to unleash this on you. So I'm not going to talk about it too much more. You just have to enjoy it. So before I get into it though, Certified Course Creation. This show is brought to you by them, certifiedcoursecreation.com. So now that I am part of the CCC team, I am so excited to be with them and what's going on there. It's changing the industry. It's disruptive. It's awesome. So here's the deal. Okay. If you are somebody who's put your time in the trenches, you have a very deep area of expertise, and you're wondering, well, what's next? What do I do? Maybe I want to stop trading time for money. I'm starting to burn out. What do I do next? Maybe you're thinking about authoring a book. Well, I'll tell you right now, books are great. They're awesome. But an online accredited certification will get you there faster and you'll make more money. That's it. You'll have more freedom. You can literally be making money while you sleep and getting your knowledge out there and making a difference. It's a win-win-win. It's amazing. So go to certifiedcoursecreation.com, check it out. Our new website should be up soon, but you can go there and get more information. And I would suggest booking a call. I'll take a call with you, right? And we talk about your idea, flush it out a little bit, see where the opportunity is, if it's worth pursuing, because we only take on projects that we think are going to be big. So I'm open to having that conversation. I would love to have that conversation with you, because we are making dreams come true and helping people realize things that they never thought were possible. And you could be the next one. So go to certifiedcoursecreation.com, check it out. And now, without further ado, episode number 125 with Max Shank. Enjoy the ride. All right, and we're live. Max Shank, welcome back, man.
Thanks for having me, brother. Good to be here.
Yeah.
Well, Be here. You're there, but we're still here. It's great.
The ethereal here. And, I don't get too many people on the podcast for a second round, but I just had so much fun the first time. And I was telling you before this, I usually have an agenda as well. Like, hey, let's hit these points. But I feel like maybe we do the audience a better service by just, talking big topics. And tell me what's going on in your life right now. Where are you? For the people who are listening and not watching, what are you doing right now?
I am sitting in my backyard talking to you. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Encinitas in Southern California. I got my setup here is pretty nice. I have an outdoor jungle gym. I think you've probably seen it before in all the 5-minute flow videos.
Yeah.
There's this custom made rig in my backyard. And, the beauty is I think it's probably only like $1,700 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I've had it. No, I had a friend make it custom.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So he welded it together, and there's monkey bars and stall bars and parallel bars. I have all kinds of stuff hanging from it for climbing and, also like dodging stuff, kind of like a double end bag sort of situation. And I mean, I would strongly, I don't want to come off too aggressive here, but I mean, if you have a backyard, set yourself up some sort of rig back there that you can hang off of. Just having something to hang off of every day that's easily accessible.
Yeah.
It just lets you put so much like money in the strength bank, I like to call it.
Yeah.
You know, those little moments, and the more accessibility you have, the easier it is to do that. So if you have within your exercise Rolodex all kinds of stuff you can do in different environments, like for example, if you're standing in line, you take one leg off the ground, and then whatever foot you still have on the ground, you just lift that heel up, and you see how long you can balance on the ball of that one foot. And it's like, as far as I'm concerned, that's free money. It takes all it takes is a little tiny bit of paying attention. You know, a guy who does some coaching that I know talks about the concept of play vision. So wherever you are, you just kind of have this intent of seeing what kind of stuff you can play around with. So, I mean, even something like just like a curb, balancing on the curb, or, hey, there's a box over there. Can I jump up on that box and land without making a sound, or something like that? So
yeah,
having easy accessibility to something you can hang from is huge, because unfortunately we don't have a lot of stuff like that readily available in human habitats. Like, we go to great lengths to make the monkey habitat really enjoyable for the monkeys to climb around on stuff, but I think we like treat human beings a little bit worse. We don't give them the exercise environment that's actually conducive to health. So
yeah,
I mean, if you have any space at all, having something to hang.
We're a little too busy adulting, Max, to be doing that type of thing, right?
Dude, ain't that the truth, brother? I mean, I've had some funny experiences relinquishing some of those adulting responsibilities, because, you know, you started this show talking about let's talk about the big stuff, let's talk about the important stuff. And
yeah,
I find that the more I ask that question, what's the most important, it kind of leads me to perhaps like a better alternative than whatever I'm doing right now. And there's this guy named who was named Friedrich Hegel, and he said freedom is understanding the truth of necessity. And as an adult, we're made to believe that a lot of shit is necessary.
Yeah.
But most of it actually isn't. And I remember my dad taught me the 3-3-3 rule of real necessities, which is the average person, if they do not breathe for 3 minutes, they'll die. If they do not drink water for 3 days, they will die. And if they do not eat for 3 weeks, they will die. And those are about as tip top of the necessity hierarchy as you can possibly get.
Yeah.
So once you have that as your framework, it kind of puts things into perspective a little bit. And, you know, something I get a lot of flack for is I'm pretty hard to reach via email these days, because I hit this. I know it's a wonderful thing. I can't tell you how much peace and serenity I have in my life, because it's funny. I mean, I signed up for an email when I was a child. I didn't have any legal representation. I didn't sign a contract that said I'm going to answer emails every day until I'm dead. And it's like, you know, you get like bombarded by this noise, and it's an effort to filter through all that stuff. And there's no good and bad, really. There's just consequences, right? And a lot of the stuff that we're made to believe is totally necessary maybe isn't as necessary as we were led to believe. And if you keep asking, well, what's most important on a regular basis, if you're a rational person, that'll probably change. And B, at least you'll be able to point yourself in the right direction of what you want to do. And I think I was telling you, we had it was great talking to you just on the phone the other day. I think I told you that one of the consequences of not answering emails was that the trash company stopped picking up my trash, because they had emailed me that my credit card expired. But of course, I didn't get the email because I didn't check it for like 3 months. And so I called them up. I'm like, hey, man, why aren't you guys getting my trash? And they're like, well, we tried to email you. And I was like, oh, well, you know, full of responsibility for that. And it's kind of the thing that trips people up, I think, is that we give so much gravity and weight to these have tos and need tos and shoulds and ought tos. And I think that's what's most disheartening about the fitness industry sometimes, is the way to differentiate yourself as a professional is to say that you should do it this way that I'm telling you, because if you do it the other way, it's bad. Or you'll hurt yourself or something like that. So there's all these like scare tactics so that people can find their place in the guru hierarchy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because what better way to say that your shit is good than to say everyone else's shit stinks, right?
Right.
And the reality for fitness is, I wrote an article called "Are You Healthier Than a Plant?" And it's like a joke, but it's also true to put things into perspective. You know, I've this year at Ambition Athletics, which is a gym I started when I was 21, we are celebrating our 10th year anniversary in business right now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, thanks. And, you know, we've paid pretty close attention to the things that actually help people move the needle, so to speak, in terms of making life and fitness better. And, you know, a lot of it comes down to the simple things. So anyway, are you healthier than a plant means, are you getting sunshine? Are you getting water? And a lot of people aren't even hitting that, you know? So it's like you start out at plant level and you're like, okay, let's get as healthy as a plant. Then we're like, okay, how about we go one step up, which is as healthy as a dog, which means you drink enough water, you get sunshine, and you go for a walk every day. And these should be like no-brainers, in my opinion. But you would be amazed at how many people don't do these couple basic things. And then if you want to upgrade from there, I go on in the article talking about getting to like monkey level, where maybe you're climbing and playing a little bit. And then human level, where you're entering into something which is really cool, called artistic expression or emotional content. You know, Bruce Lee talked about that a lot, is having your movement have emotional content to it. So you're not just thinking your way through executing a kick or executing a punch. You're actually able to manifest some emotional content within the framework of that movement. And I think that's something that we can all strive for from a fitness perspective too, because fitness to me is a daily dialogue that you can have with yourself without words. And it's a very different way of looking at the big picture. You know, we look at some of the realities that people face as adults. And, you know, much to my chagrin, it was not my lack of a six-pack that was preventing me from attracting members of the opposite sex, right? It's not these things that we think are so important. It's how do you find a way to comfortably live with yourself and express yourself honestly through whatever you're doing without being terrified that people are going to judge you so harshly.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that daily nonverbal dialogue through movement becomes so valuable. And of course, that's part of where the 5-minute flow concept came from, is like, let's chill out with the fear tactic based fitness and just start by moving our joints in circles every day and breathing and slowing the hell down a little bit. It's like my favorite, one of my favorite little cartoons is like, I recommend you meditate for at least 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then I recommend you meditate for an hour a day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, we talk about adulting, and I'd be curious too, you know, going back to how long did you go without email? Are you still doing no email, or how's that?
So I'm touching on the emails like roughly once a week because I got some important projects, and I'm not writing letters. to people. You know what has been great about it? So I'm like probably 3 months in, to answer your question. I've had a lot more awesome conversations with people in person and on the phone since basically abandoning social media and email, because to me it wasn't really a viable substitute for human connection. So I find myself now, because it's weird when, and I was connecting with like roughly 50,000 people on the internet on like a daily, weekly basis, right?
Wow.
It doesn't really satisfy the same. It's a poor substitute for real interaction. And the problem with it is it sort of satisfies you. So you think that you're getting these human interactions with other people, but really it's just letters on a screen ultimately most of the time. And of course you can do video, and what we're doing is pretty awesome. But if you get worn out and you use up all your energy in these like half interactions, you're not going to have the energy to create those like deep interactions where maybe and I know they're totally different, but one of the things that I really enjoy doing is inviting a few friends over, sharing some food, doing some slacklining, throwing and catching a medicine ball or some other object like that. And you can really connect with someone in a deep and meaningful way. And you can start to develop this environment where people feel like they can be 100% open and honest with each other. And that's what's going to make this adulting bullshit easier, because we're all concerned about something. There are all these considerations. Oh, like what if people don't like when I do this, or what if this happens, or what if that happens? And the last thing you want is to feel like you have to put some sort of false avatar between you and everybody else. And that's kind of the environment that we're in right now. It's like, I can't imagine being like a high school kid right now, because the value proposition on what is important seems like so back-asswards, in my opinion. But once again, like, I don't really know what's going on because I don't have any children, and I don't, and I'm also not a 16-year-old in high school right now. But I remember sort of what it was like, and we didn't have social media then either, and we didn't have, we're always comparing with everybody else. There is a hierarchy.
Yes.
And I used to believe that if I could lift a heavier kettlebell overhead, that people would like me more. And the weird part is that in a way, some did, and some still do.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
In some ways it worked. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Like let's not kid ourselves. We like that. And because of the interconnectedness of the internet, you're always going to find someone half as big and twice as strong as you, no matter what. I mean, like the example I always use is the 12-year-old Chinese gymnast girl who's basically better than me at everything I could want to do. You know what I'm saying? They're like, oh, so do I really compare myself to that, or do I just not worry about the comparing thing and just get in there and do my thing? And that's why, circling back, movement and exercise hopefully is that daily nonverbal dialogue that you have with yourself, where you kind of just ask your question every day of like, well, what can't I do yet? Right. And then you sort of expand your circle of competence, you expand your radius of how far you can go. And if you just frequently like touch these little things like balancing or hand balancing or squatting on one leg or any of that stuff, you start to build up enough data to really see where your weak points are. And then what happens is the shift that I noticed was I went from basically being a strength performer in a sense of I want to see how much weight I can lift so I can compare against everyone else, to now it's more like I'm I'm Sherlock Holmes in every training session, and I'm trying to discover where the root weakness is. So it's not that I'm trying to lift a certain amount of weight. It's not that I'm trying to perform a certain thing generally. It's more like exploring, like what can I do today, and what can I not do yet, and where can I find that like little challenge that I need to keep things interesting enough that I want to continue with it, but not so challenging that you get frustrated and discouraged.
Yeah. It's interesting, man. I hear you talking. I have a couple questions too. One of which is, do you put structure to your day? But the thought that came up to me is that, I only hit the gym now officially like once, maybe twice a week. And I used to be very structured, right? It was like
Mm-hmm.
A, B1, B2, right?
Right.
C1,
Oh, yeah.
C2, finisher, right? Whatever. That was it. There was no questioning. And I didn't realize until recent months that it just felt like work. And sometimes if I go into this gym with no structure whatsoever and I kind of look around and start doing things that I find the most enjoyable, that's all I do. Like if all I want to do in one day is like, I love hang cleans. That just makes me happy, so I do it.
Yeah. It's very satisfying.
And then you know what? Then I leave. And that's it. Maybe a sauna. And then I go on with my day and I feel energized. And it doesn't feel like, I think we had talked about this in previous interview, how we're always racing with ourselves, especially if we're, been athletic our whole life, right?
Oh yeah.
I feel like I'm always in competition with something, but I don't know where the fuck that comes from. And then I just kind of let it go within a few months of my training. I'm like, well, I don't have, there's no one watching here seeing like if I'm progressing. No one cares.
Right.
No one cares.
Right.
And it was incredibly freeing. Like today, after this, I'm going to head to the gym. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but I think I'm just going to hang for some shit for a while,
Awesome.
and play with that. Right. And
dude, yeah,
it's an amazing thing. And I wish more people looked at it like that. But a lot of people need that structure too, right? They need that going in. They need to see the linear progression throughout their training. It takes a certain, I guess, you have to put enough time under your belt to realize what you really want with your training.
Mm. Intuitive training is hard to sell to a beginner because it sounds too scary and it sounds like they might make a mistake. And of course, the conventional wisdom is that if you don't have some expert guiding you, that you will make a mistake, because that's how you sell expert coaching the best. Right. It's like, don't do this shit on your own. You better listen to me for, It's like, what are the top 10 push-up mistakes? Well, the top 1 push-up mistake is to not do any push-ups, right? So, I don't want to, the last thing I want to do is fill someone's head with more shit that they have to worry about and be afraid of. It's like, let's put things into perspective once again. All of your ancestors were robust enough to survive and procreate all the way through history right now. Like that's incredible, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah.
It's impossible that 10 generations ago, your ancestors didn't survive long enough to procreate and then raise those children long enough to survive also. Like the human body is extremely resilient and robust if you just give it a little stimulus. So teaching people to be afraid that they'll hurt themselves is like, it's like a nocebo effect. So instead of placebo, it's nocebo, coming from like the word noxious. So you have this like pain stimulus that is created by fear, essentially. And there's so much research on things like placebo. One of the most interesting ones I read within the last year was that irritable bowel syndrome had a 20% rate of resolution. So 20% of irritable bowel cases were resolved with a known placebo. So get this. So it wasn't like a double-blind study. It was like they told these people with irritated bowels, we're going to give you a sugar pill and that's going to cure your bowels. And 20% of them, sure enough, it did. Now, what the hell is going on there?
Yeah.
I believe the brain is very powerful and way more than any of us realize. I think that the last thing you want to do is put the idea in someone's head that they can't change their brain, that they can't change their body. It's an incredible piece of equipment that we don't really fully understand.
No,
but there are two things that seem at odds with each other. But it doesn't matter what you say, matters what you do, and one word can make all the difference, plus or minus. So they seem like totally opposites, right? But what's got me thinking about this so much is my brother's about to have a kid. My other friend just had a kid. So everyone's having babies basically around me.
Yeah.
And I'm doing my best, coming from being like a type A control freak, ridiculously ambitious, success-driven individual, to more of like I guess I don't even know what to call it. I'm just kind of doing my thing day by day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And everybody wants to give this advice on how to be a good parent. And how to be a good parent is probably the same advice as how to be a good coach to yourself. You know what I mean? There are a lot of similarities there.
Sure.
And what I told my brother is like, I don't know shit about parenting because I'm not a parent. I don't have any kids. So take this with a grain of salt. But the other thing is, it doesn't matter what you say. It matters what they see. So monkey see, monkey do. And one word plus or minus really can make all the difference. So when you think about how to put together a strategy and then individual tactics for the sake of health and fitness, it's really important that you frame these things in your mind with specific language that you actually understand. If your only goal with exercise is to burn fat, for example, and you go, okay, well, why do you want to burn fat? And then we can figure out like, oh, well, it's because I want to attract a mate and have babies and shit like that. Maybe. I don't know.
Yep. That's majority.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's pretty reasonable. Like I said, I was convinced that if I got 6-pack abs, that girls would want to sleep with me. But that was so far from the truth that it made my head spin. And I had to reevaluate my entire strategy.
Yeah, it's the beard. You figured it out, right?
It's the beard. Man.
Yeah.
I wish I could say it was anything that I actually did, but I think it's just I'm just the epitome of getting lucky. I think that's where they got that term.
Yeah, it's good timing. Yeah.
So you have to really consider what the root cause of your desires are with exercise. And if it's to take something away from you, well, you got to consider, well, okay, what happens after you lose as much fat as you want to lose? What then? And I'll tell you what, the people who lose a bunch of fat really quick because they were trying to lose a bunch of fat really quick will put it back on because they don't have a plan for afterward that involves developing their character in some way. There are a lot of ways to do that. I don't want to come off as saying that people need to do this, but being able to hang from a bar or a tree for an extended period of time gives you a level of confidence that you can get no other way. Being able to carry an object for 10 consecutive minutes and maybe do some squats throughout, like a sandbag carry, that will teach you more about yourself than almost any words I could possibly teach you.
Yeah.
Because you're going to hit a point where every single step is you going, I think I'd like to put this sandbag down now.
Yeah.
And then you go, yeah, I think I want to put this sandbag down now. Ooh, I really, really want to put this sandbag down now. I can't possibly hold on to this sandbag anymore. And so you go through this evolution where you can start to develop your mind and body concurrently, which is, I think, another potential trap that people fall into is they create this very distinct separation between the body and the mind. And I think that's a real mistake because you have to consider the whole self. I remember going through some certifications, and I've been through so many exercise certifications and I've taught so many myself, where they and I would say, if this, then this, if this, then this. And also watch out for this, because if you do this, you'll hurt yourself. And it's like, it's not really constructive, actually. But I realized over the last, let's see, how long have I been doing this? 13 years or so, that it's really never that simple. Like, there's a shoulder impingement test where you put your palm on your opposite shoulder and you lift your elbow up as high as you can. If that hurts, or if you can't lift your shoulder up, it meant that you have impingement. But the last thing you want to do is tell some 18-year-old trainer that that's how it works, because it gives you this Frankenstein body philosophy that you're just this collection of parts. And it's like, oh, well, just grease up that joint and that'll solve the problem. Or you just got to loosen this guy up. And sometimes that's what it is. Sometimes a person has back problems because their hips are stiff and weak. Sometimes a person has back problems because their core is weak. Sometimes they have low back problems because their thoracic spine is totally stiff and their lumbar spine compensates for it. Sometimes you'll get someone with a really tight soleus muscle down by their ankle that creates a shortening across the entire posterior chain, and you just happen to feel it in your low back. Or maybe you just sit with really horrible posture for 8 hours a day. Or maybe your posture while you sit is great, but you hate your job. The number one workers' compensation injury is low back problems in non-manual labor. So why is everybody hurting their back? Or why does everybody have a sore back? And you can link it back to depression or all of these other things. So I think my point in a very roundabout way is to say, dude, we don't know. It's just how big is the observable universe? Yeah, we don't know. What's the best thing you can do for exercise? I don't know either. But the one thing that does make sense to do is give yourself a little big picture perspective and figure out what you're trying to achieve and why. Why is it important to you? How does this integrate with who you want to be as a person and what you would like your actual character to be? And that will lead you to a much more constructive and repeatable set of behaviors. And you'll discover more who you are every day through exercise, instead of trying to race or trying to win a race that you can't possibly ever win.
Yeah, which is where I've been for so many years. And, I want to unpack something that you've said a couple times in about one word, right? The power of one word can change everything. Unpack that a little bit, man. Explain that. What do you mean by that thought? Maybe give us an example or something that we can wrap our heads around. Because I think that's a really,
sure.
I see where you're going with it. It's powerful.
Yeah. There are a couple ways you can interpret that. And I won't say should, but there are a couple ways you can interpret it. Number one is most of us really lack understanding of basic definitions of words. So there's a term called semantic precision, which basically is just a fancy way of saying you know the definition of the words you're using. And what I discovered as an adult, quote, is that I basically had no clue what the definitions of many basic words were. And so that's the starting point, is if you're reading something, you should always have a dictionary readily available. And, with smartphones and stuff like that now, anytime you read and you hit a word that you don't understand, you got to highlight it right away. Because if you don't, you'll basically have a huge gap in your ability to digest that information. And then the other part is, we talked about freedom as being the understanding the truth of necessity. Mm-hmm. Even understanding what the word necessary means to you in a deep and significant way is going to change the way you look at your health and fitness journey. So if you create false obligations, it's going to be an unnecessary weight on your psyche and on your body.
Yeah.
So it's really important to be very selective with what kind of language you use to describe what it is you're trying to achieve. And I don't know if I can think of a more succinct way to say it. Like for example, if you came to me and said, "Hey Max, what should I do to increase the strength in my legs?" And I would say, well, number one, there's nothing you should do, is what I would say to that, right? Like, 'cause there's just stuff that you can do if you want to. There's not a should, there's not a right, there's not a wrong. So that's kind of the starting point. But then I would say, what you might try is X, Y, and Z. Or the other way to look at it is, let's talk a little bit first and let's see what the rest of your life looks like. And let's understand a little bit better, well, why do you want to have stronger legs? What do you want them to be stronger for? Because, there are a lot of people who have strong legs who can't really jump and land softly for even 1 minute. And so it really depends a lot on what the aim is for utility with that target.
Yes.
So does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, there's you answered it in many different ways, and I think there's the point is people actually have to think, right, with that answer, right? And that's you can't always serve things up on a silver platter. It's like, hey, sometimes we just ask a question for the sake of asking a question, so that it'll provoke the thought within someone's head. And I think that's you mentioned the utility of training, and how, if you can tie it into, like you said, the why, which is always important when you and I talk, we always have that conversation about the why, but how is it serving you, right? How is every minute of the day actually serving you? And that's, when we talk about where you've gone on your journey from type A, super driven, right? I'm guessing you probably went through one of those journeys where maybe you had, an epiphany or a crash or something. Like, maybe you didn't, but that's kind of the usual story, right? That was my story, right? Had a big crash at one point, and just shifted every fucking thing, right? Like, sold the business, hit the road, right? Started doing things that I want to do, refocus my training from, getting some random ranking in a CrossFit Open to, how is it actually serving my life? And, like today, even as we're speaking, I'm like, maybe I won't go to the gym. Maybe I'll just go skiing. It's a beautiful day, right? What's going to serve me better?
There you go.
What do I need to do? And I'm also thinking about every damn thing that stacks up on my calendar that I don't really need to be doing. Like,
well, look at the word need, man. I mean, anytime you say need, should, have to, must, that should be like a huge red flag, because as far as I'm concerned, that needs to be somewhere close to as important as air, water, and food in order to be really taken seriously. And the rest of it, like, you can probably suffer the consequences of some alleged lapses. We put so much so many obligations on ourselves. Like, you have to do this for your exercise session, or you're a pussy, or you have to do this, or you have to do that. And it's like, come on, man. Like, really? Yeah. Like, you can, like, okay. So if your goal is just to survive a long time, don't eat too much food, walk every day, and have good relationships with your community. Like, you don't even have to have much. Like, if you study all the, I think they're called blue zones, where people live the longest. Yeah. There are a lot of factors there. There's some genetics and hereditary that has a big impact, but by and large, the pace of life is a lot slower.
Yes.
So whenever you start putting needs and obligations, that one word should be a huge red flag that just says, hey, pay attention. Because just like what you were talking about with that, like, professional crash, pain is just an action signal that says do something different. It's not very specific. And Ida Rolf had a great quote about pain, which is, where you think it is, it ain't. And that one has always spoken to me really well. I mean, this is someone who's like at the top of their field, but you don't need to use any flowery language. And, in my own coaching, I've experienced people with back problems due to hip restrictions, and I've experienced people with back problems simply due to the fact that they thought they were depressed, but actually they were just sad. And as soon as they reframed the word depressed into sad, and it's a long story, a long time ago now, like probably close to 8 or 7 years ago. And I remember talking with her, and we did all kinds of exercises. And I was doing like eye exercises and breathing exercises and all this stuff I learned from like pain management specialists. And ultimately what made a difference, our exercise stuff that we did for a few sessions did like close to zero. She was in so much pain. She's a 40-year-old woman walking with a cane. And I mean, our exercise was like marginally effective. It basically did nothing. Yeah. But talking to her for a session for about 45 minutes and understanding like, what happened before the pain started? What happened before that? And what happened before that? And what do you feel about it now? And she's like, oh, I'm just so depressed. And I was like, well, actually, based on listening to what you're saying, it sounds like you're sad because you have a lot of reason to be sad. And in fact, you have a lot of reason to be angry too. So rather than putting this label of depression on yourself, maybe just allow yourself to be angry and sad, because quite frankly, if I were in your shoes, I would be too. So she starts like bawling tears. And she touched her toes for the first time right after that, for the first time in like 2 years. And it's like, once again, I feel like I just reached new horizons of ignorance. We feel like we're learning more and more, but really it's like as soon as you learn 10% more about a subject, you learn that there's 100% more about that subject. Like every time I learn something new in the field of neuroscience, I also simultaneously become aware of 10 times more stuff that I now know exists, but know nothing about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
the more you know, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know shit. And
bingo.
That's it. Yeah. I've been saying that for years. Yeah. Because it's true.
And everything that we're talking about is with the goal of living better or living longer, really. We want to either have our lives be better right now, and who cares how long? Some people are like that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. Mm-hmm. And then other people are on the other end of the spectrum, and they say, well, the number one goal of exercise should be to live as long as possible. Yes. Hey, maybe also. Who knows?
Yeah.
But in any case, you have to look at the big picture of what's going on, and you can't get too blinded by a small perspective, because then you're not going to be able to see all the other stuff going on around you.
Yeah. Yeah. Perspective is a funny thing, right? And I listen to a lot of Joe Rogan, and there's this quote he always has, right? And it's like, whenever you start to think that maybe your problems are pretty serious, or you start taking things in a little bit too harsh of consideration on what I should or shouldn't do. And there's those words again, right? Should.
Yeah.
Just remember that, at the end of the day, we're walking, talking monkeys on a, flying rock, right? Going around an endless universe. Like how big,
spaceship Earth.
Yeah. Like what, if you decide to go on that trip to Hawaii, or, go get your latte, the universe doesn't really care which one you do. And so just be free. Like, just understand that should be free. And some people are like, oh my God, I feel so small. That I feel so uncomfortable. Yeah, exactly. So do whatever you want, because you're only here for a flash of a microsecond compared to the bigger picture of things. I mean, maybe that's a little out there for people, but you should reflect on that. I think people should reflect on their own mortality every day, and look up in the sky and realize that, holy cow, there's a lot going on up there. Things that we can't even possibly imagine yet. and maybe your problems won't seem that big anymore, you know?
One of my favorite teachers who I never met was Richard Feynman, who was a physicist, and he has a great book, or it's a pretty funny book called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. And then he also does this great little YouTube video about the nature of a question based on why, and about why it's so difficult to answer a question like that. And I'll paraphrase it briefly to illustrate the point. So this guy was asking him about magnetism and like how magnets repel each other. And he said, well, they just do, because I can't really explain why. And the guy goes, well, I think that's a good question. Why? And he's like, well, let me give you an example. If Aunt Gertrude falls down and breaks her hip and goes to the hospital, you would say, well, why? And I could say, well, she slipped on the ice and she fell. And that might be enough to satisfy you, but it wouldn't be enough to satisfy an alien, because they would have to have an understanding of what a hospital is and why a hospital exists. They would have to have ice explained to them. And then you could follow up with an endless supply of why questions that eventually become unanswerable. And the example he uses of the ice is quite an interesting one, because then you ask, well, why is ice slippery? And that's a really interesting question, because unlike most things, ice expands when it freezes. So when you apply pressure to ice, it actually heats up and it creates a little film of water. And it turns out that ice is like one of the most slippery things that there is. And then you go, okay, well, why does water do that, but nothing else? And then you go into this like series of why questions where you're like, man, I can't really explain why she went to the hospital because she slipped on the ice, because it just gets more and more confusing to explain.
Yeah.
And the same thing is really true with any way that you'd like to understand how life works, if there was ever such a possibility that you could understand how life works.
Yeah.
And the reality is that, we have a couple advantages as talking monkeys, in that we have, my phrase that I like to say is chimps don't take notes. And so we get to read books, and we get to watch videos, and we get to learn from teachers. And, if you read books, you can live 1,000 lifetimes within one, in terms of all the lessons that you can absorb. And, rather than worry, you can just keep learning, because that's what makes life interesting ultimately, is the learning. I hope that people never get a pill that will make them look perfect, but not get all of the benefits of exercise that there are for your mind. Yeah. Because I think it would, shoot, I guess there's no point like wishing this would happen or that wouldn't happen either way. But I think if the focus is mostly on the result, then you're ultimately going to arrive at a very unsatisfying end. And I think that's probably parallel to what you were talking about with the professional crash. And that was certainly what I experienced too, as I got to this point where, I had taught close to 200 workshops all over the world. I'd written 3 books. I bought my house, and I was like basically living large. And it was not nearly as satisfying as I thought it would be, in terms of like, I thought I would like hit the peak of this mountaintop. And really what happens is you go like, oh man, it was a lot more interesting when I was climbing this mountain than when I was sitting at the top of it.
Yeah. My wife and I had this discussion, because we had people visiting this past weekend. And I was like, God, we looked back, we're trying to look back and like, when was life just cruising, right? Like, when was it easy? When was it fun? When was, and it is right now. I don't want to go back. I don't want to think like I'm very satisfied with everything that's going on right now. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. That's a good question to keep asking though, right?
It is. And it turned out to be this time when like, my gym was about 5 years old. We just moved in together. We were living in this small condo. Cash flow was great. I was golfing on Wednesdays and Fridays. She was climbing on the weekends. And then, that type A, like, I got to get more, right? Okay, I got to expand
More.
him, right?
More.
Let's get a bigger house.
More.
Let's get another car. Yeah, more. Right?
More.
And sure as shit,
Hungry,
then the crash
more.
happened. Yeah, and
Yeah, totally, man.
yeah, invested in another gym, started corporate wellness, right? All these things happen, and then just became, insidiously tired and out of touch with what was really important. And I think that's a big message for people. And I want to bring up another one because I think this is probably lost a couple of people on this podcast already, but that's okay. Like, I think when
maybe
we look at this is the number I always bring up too, is like, remember, okay, so we are on a planet in one galaxy, right? Around one sun.
Oh yeah.
Now there are in our universe, or in our we're in one solar system in one galaxy, right? There's 100 billion stars in one galaxy. There's 100 billion galaxies in the universe that we know of. So it's like, God, like, do people think about that ever?
No.
I mean, they don't, right?
Well, it's impossible to really understand. Like, we can have all these numbers. I mean, one of the things that I've taken to recently is the game of Go, which is this ancient Asian strategy game. And one of the more fascinating figures is that there are more possibilities for what a game can look like than there are atoms in the universe. It's like 1.4 times 10 to the 147 or something weird like that. It's like an absurd number. And it's just like how you were saying that it was minus 48 in Montana. It's like, I don't have any way to understand that. Just the same way the average person has no way of understanding the concept of infinity or the concept of the universe or even galaxies, really. Like, we're so cavalier with a term like light years. And it's like, dude, we could try to understand that, but we never will. And, my friend's dad, when we were young, said, never try to figure people out. And that has actually stuck with me quite a lot, because if there are, for the sake of argument, an infinite number of possibilities for how to arrange white and black stones on a 19 by 19 grid, there has to be even more possibilities for how a human being can go from being zero into being like a 25-year-old person. It's not going to be really possible for you to understand or figure out what makes that person tick, short of the basic true necessities, which we talked about before. It's like air, water, and food. And if you think about everybody needing those things above everything else, and then after that, it's basically, well, where are you in the social hierarchy for most of us? It's fun. I mean, I have a pretty awesome truck, at least so I thought, from my time when I was very, very financially success driven. And my 16-year-old cousin came over with his friend. They're like, "Hey, Max, can we see your truck?" And I was like, "Yeah," thinking in my head, like, "Oh, they're going to think I'm cool because it's my awesome truck." And so I open up the truck and he goes, "Pop the hood." And I'm like, shit, I don't know where the hood release is. So if I don't figure this out quickly, they're going to know I really know nothing about cars, which is true, by the way. Yeah. I know that if the needle goes to E, then I need to add more gas in the thing. Yeah. So I open up the hood, and in true form of what it means to be like a 16-year-old male, they very kindly, and I think inadvertently heckled me at how small my engine was, but how I had room for a bigger one. Right? So it was like the good baseball players trying to help the other kid hit a baseball off the tee. You know what I mean? Yeah. They were like, "Oh man, you only got a V6 in here. We could fix this for you. And we could put like a V8 in here, maybe even like a V10. And so they're just talking to me about how I can get a bigger engine. Meanwhile, 10 minutes ago, I was like perfectly content with my truck. And in fact, sometimes I think it's too big for what I need.
Yeah.
But then just like that, instantly almost, I'm now getting heckled by these 16-year-olds because my truck engine is too small and they want to help me solve this problem that I allegedly have. And I'm just laughing. So then we go to the street where his friend has just put a V8 in an old Jeep. And so these 16-year-old kids are like revving the hell out of this engine in my front yard. I'm like, oh, that does sound like a bigger engine for sure.
Yeah.
And then they speed away. And I'm just thinking like, what the hell just happened right there? Because they are in the thick of it, trying to separate themselves from the pack. So you go through this cycle, I think, where you're basically your parents, and then you try to separate from them when you become like a teenager into adulthood, and everything you do is to try to separate from them and separate from the pack so you can get a better place in the social hierarchy. So for me, it was like a perfect metaphor for where I'm at right now relative to where I was in terms of where I had my priorities. You know what I mean? And I think that a lot of us get stuck in that loop forever where we're constantly comparing to everybody else. And another wise teacher I've never met, Charlie Munger, has a great little thing on envy. And he goes, envy is the worst of the possible sins because it's the only one you can't possibly have any fun at. I mean,
That's great.
I think we can all agree that lust and gluttony are a pretty damn good time, at least.
Yeah.
But envy is no fun at all.
Yeah, that's great.
So if you're concerned about comparing your performance with exercise to somebody else, well, I promise that just ain't going to be fun. You might as well just go skiing and try to get good at being a caring lover, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
that's great messaging. Go ski, be a better lover. Yeah. Well, that's great, man. So you're, I know you and I talked over the phone a few weeks back, and you're working on some projects, right? Is there anything you can tell us about? Give us a little sneak preview. What's going on? I mean, this will probably air about a month from now, anyway.
Oh man, well, I do have an invention coming out soon, but I can't reveal any more than that, unfortunately. Awesome. But you can stay up to date on the developments of that at maxshank.com, and I'll keep everybody posted there. But the only thing I'll say is that there's absolutely nothing like it, which has made it doubly difficult to get the design correct in a way that is both durable and usable for the designated tasks. Outside of that, that's kind of the main thing. Like I said, we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary at Ambition Athletics, which I'm very excited about. And I haven't taught any seminars for quite a while. Just as we talked about, I got totally burnt out.
Yeah.
Traveling 33 weeks a year was like not actually what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
It did satisfy the success monster because I could like go out and do the thing over and over. But basically right now it's I have the online coaching group, the M3 Academy, which we do movement, muscle, and meditation. And every month we have like a slightly different focus and try to get people thinking about exercise in a bit of a different way. And then kind of going back through, Ultimate Athleticism was a program I put together at the end of 2015. And it's been really just remarkably successful. And it has endorsements from a kind of astonishing amount of coaches I respect that range from like Ross Enamate, Charlie Weingroff, Dan John, Eric Cobb from Z Health, Rob Wolf, who did the paleo diet solution, And it's right now what I'm doing is I'm going back through and I am basically using the same philosophy, which is maximum efficiency for developing overall athleticism, but I'm approaching it with a more minimalistic perspective that is maybe a little bit more user-friendly, perhaps.
Yeah.
Because
Adaptable
one of the
to
things...
masses.
Yeah, a little bit more adaptable to the masses, because even though if you follow the progressions in ultimate athleticism, you can basically get anyone to doing to the point where they're doing handstands and deadlifts and airborne lunges and things like that. I think about athleticism a little bit differently, and what I realize is that a lot of it has to do with the environment that you're in. So, for example, you might have someone who's exceptionally strong when they're laying down on a bench, but as soon as you have them do like a standing chest press from a lunge position, it kind of goes all to pieces. So that total body integration based on the environment that you're in, like can you create torque and tension when you're hanging? Can you create torque and tension when you're crawling? Can you roll around on the ground and maneuver yourself easily? I kind of like to say that a Persian, it would work for Persians too. A person's relationship,
too, Max.
Yeah, I agree completely. A person's relationship with the ground is a really strong indicator of how soon they'll be buried underneath it. Yeah. As I work with more and more people, I find myself mostly being called upon to work with people who are between 60 and 80, and sometimes a little bit older than 80. And part of the reason for that is that I'm really good at what I do, but I'm also expensive. So it's not like a ton of like 20-year-olds can afford training sessions with me. But what I find is that people develop a fear of the ground. And it's really quite interesting. And it starts with just being, like, I'm not afraid of the ground necessarily, but if I get down there, it's a lot of effort to get back up. So they shy away from getting down there in the first place.
Yeah.
And the ability to just roll yourself over on the ground without using your hands is like one of those things that now seems like an obvious no-brainer.
Yeah.
But we don't really practice, and it's kind of it's really unfortunate how we kind of leave people high and dry when it comes to actual functionality that will help them survive and thrive longer. And we spend so much effort and energy saying that you need to do 3 sets of 8 instead of 3 sets of 7 or 4 sets of 10 or whatever the hell it is. But in actuality, you got to look at, well, what are you going to encounter in your life? Like, what is actually going to be something that you are faced with? And I'll tell you what, if you learn how to fall and you practice falling down every day, it's going to be really easy for you to get back up.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well said, man. Max, dude, it's always so cool to get you on. Yeah, man. I think I like to go places in conversation with you that most people don't. And it's fascinating. I mean, it's just grounded. It's the stuff that hopefully we just like wake one person up a little bit. Be like, hey, what are you really focusing on? Where's the quality of your life? How are you really changing people, making an impact, and all of those, kind of buzzwords? I think it's worth it. So yeah, man.
Dude, I love it. Same goes for you. I think that we always hit a really nice flow.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing when you can find that. So, I mean, I'm happy to do it anytime. Awesome. You just let me know. I'm here for you, buddy.
Right on, man. Ladies and gentlemen, Max Shank, the one and only.
Thanks again, brother. Appreciate you and all you do.
Hey, fitness fans, don't leave yet. It's your host, Eric Malzone, and I have a quick favor to ask. Actually, 3 favors. So, number 1, if you're a fan of our show, I asked you to do something that takes under 3 minutes. Go to iTunes, please, and subscribe to our show. Please, please, please. It means so much to us. It's so important. And then give us a favorable review. We would really, really appreciate it. And I can't tell you how much it means and helps us out. So I know it takes 2 minutes of your day, and it means a lot to us. So please do that. Number 2, go to our YouTube channel or Fitness Marketing Alliance, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel there. Number 3, if you like this episode or any of the episodes that we've released, share it on social. That's huge. That's a big deal for us. And we put a lot of work into these episodes, trying to give you great, actionable content for the fitness industry. So that would mean a lot. And that's it. So we have some big plans coming up for this show. I'll be talking about that in the next couple episodes. But thank you so much for listening. It means so much. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear from everybody. Eric, ERIC, at fitnessmarketingalliance.com.